The monstrous alien menagerie cackled metallically as the human army's primitive weapons merely tickled their impenetrable warship hulls, but the humans had a secret card up their sleeves that would choke out the alien laughter soon enough. The fearsome Warbeasts, genetically engineered killing machines unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. General Anthony Sullivan stood rigidly on the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's most advanced warship, as the viewscreen displayed a massive denobulan fleet emerging from hyperspace. The alien armada easily dwarfed the assembled human forces. Sullivan watched grimly as the denobulan ships opened fire, their advanced weaponry tearing through the human shields like they were made of tissue paper. "Concentrate fire on their flagship," Sullivan barked, relaying orders to the human fleet. But it was no use. The denobulan ship shrugged off the barrage, its shields barely flickering under the onslaught. Suddenly, the viewscreen crackled to life, revealing the sneering face of Sci-Fi, the denobulan emperor. "Pathetic humans," Sci-Fi mocked, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your primitive technology is no match for the might of the denobulan empire. It will be a pleasure to enslave your weak race." Sullivan slammed his fist on the console, his eyes blazing with anger. "We will never surrender to you, Sci-Fi. Humanity will fight to the last breath." The denobulan emperor threw his head back and laughed, the sound echoing through the bridge. "Your pitiful fleet will be crushed within a single denobulan solar cycle, human. Prepare to witness the end of your pathetic resistance." As if to punctuate his point, the denobulan flagship unleashed a devastating salvo that crippled the UES Retribution. Sullivan and his crew crashed to the deck as consoles exploded around them, showering the bridge with sparks and debris. Sci-Fi's mocking laughter filled the air as the viewscreen went dark, leaving the battered human fleet at the mercy of the relentless denobulan onslaught. The alien forces continued to pound the human ships, pushing them to the brink of annihilation. But Sullivan had one final trick up his sleeve, a desperate gambit that could turn the tide of the battle. He knew that if he didn't act now, the entire human race would be doomed to a fate worse than death at the hands of the merciless denobulan overlords. The battered UES Retribution shuddered and groaned as it limped back to Earth, its hull pockmarked with scars from the devastating denobulan attack. Sullivan gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white, as he watched the blue marble of his homeworld grow larger on the viewscreen. But as they approached, his heart sank. The denobulan fleet had followed them, their ships hanging in Earth's orbit like a swarm of hungry locusts. The viewscreen flickered, and Sci-Fi's face appeared, his lips curled in a triumphant sneer. "People of Earth," he boomed, his voice echoing across every frequency, "your pitiful resistance has come to an end. Surrender now, or face the annihilation of your planet." In the halls of power, Earth's leaders gathered, their faces drawn and haggard. Some argued for surrender, saying that fighting was futile, but Sullivan stood firm. "We have one last hope," he said, his voice steady. "Project Warbeast." He told them of the genetically engineered creatures, half beast, half machine, designed to be the ultimate weapons. The council was skeptical, but with Sci-Fi's deadline looming, they had no choice. They gave Sullivan the green light. As the clock ticked down, Sullivan led a strike team to the secret facility housing the Warbeasts, but as they approached, they found the place under siege, denobulan soldiers swarming the complex. Sci-Fi had learned of their plan. Sullivan and his team fought their way inside, bullets flying and energy weapons scorching the walls. In the heart of the facility, they found the Warbeasts, trapped behind a failing containment field as the denobulan closed in. Sullivan knew what he had to do. He slammed his hand on the release button, and the field collapsed. The Warbeasts surged forth, a tide of claws and teeth and metal. They tore into the denobulan, ripping them apart with savage fury. Sullivan watched, a grim smile on his face as the tide turned. The Warbeasts were more than a match for the denobulan's advanced tech. Victory was at hand. But then a new threat emerged. The wall exploded inward, and there stood Sci-Fi, encased in a towering mech suit bristling with weapons. His eyes blazed with fury as he locked onto the Warbeasts. He had come to destroy humanity's last hope personally. The Warbeast snarled, lunging at Sci-Fi's mech with an animalistic fury, but the Denobulan Emperor's war machine was a technological marvel, its armor impervious to their savage claws. Sullivan gritted his teeth as he saw his troops faltering, the creatures designed for confined spaces unable to find purchase on the mech's smooth surface. Sci-Fi's laughter boomed from the mech's external speakers, a cruel, mocking sound that filled the chamber. "Fall back!" Sullivan roared into his comms. "Get the civilians out of here now!" His team, well-trained and loyal to the last, obeyed without hesitation. They herded the remaining scientists and support staff towards the exits, covering their retreat with a hail of suppressing fire. But Sullivan knew it wouldn't be enough. Sci-Fi's mech was carving through the Warbeasts like a hot knife through butter, leaving mangled, twitching corpses in its wake. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Sullivan sprinted towards the largest of the Warbeasts, a hulking brute he had nicknamed Goliath. The creature turned its massive head towards him, its eyes glinting with a savage intelligence. "It's all right, big guy," Sullivan muttered, clambering onto the Warbeast's back. "It's all or nothing." Goliath seemed to understand, letting out a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of the facility. With a burst of speed that belied its size, the Warbeast charged straight at Sci-Fi's mech, Sullivan clinging to its back like a jockey on a racehorse. Sci-Fi's mech pivoted, bringing its weapons to bear. A torrent of fire erupted from its arm cannons, stitching a line of destruction across the floor. Goliath zigzagged, its genetically enhanced reflexes allowing it to dodge the worst of the barrage. But even its tough hide couldn't withstand the onslaught forever. Smoking craters appeared on its flanks, leaking viscous, dark blood. Yet still it charged, closing the distance with a speed that seemed to catch Sci-Fi off guard. At the last possible second, Sullivan leaped from Goliath's back, tucking into a roll as he hit the ground. The Warbeast, freed of its rider, slammed into the mech's chest with the force of a freight train. Its claws, reinforced with an experimental alloy, punctured the mech's shielding, finding purchase in the armor beneath. Sci-Fi bellowed in rage, the mech's arms flailing as it tried to dislodge the Warbeast. But Goliath held on with grim tenacity, its claws ripping and tearing at the mech's innards. Sullivan, seizing his chance, raised his pulse rifle and fired into the breach. His shots found their mark, sparks erupting from the mech's exposed power core. The resulting explosion was cataclysmic. A wave of heat and light engulfed the chamber, hurling Sullivan backwards like a rag doll. He hit the wall with a sickening crunch, stars exploding across his vision. Through the ringing in his ears, he could hear the dying screams of the remaining Warbeasts, their voices mingling with the tortured screeching of Sci-Fi's mech as it tore itself apart. And then silence. Sullivan struggled to his feet, his body a symphony of pain. His armor was scorched and dented, his skin blistered and raw, but he was alive. He staggered forward, his eyes fixed on the smoking ruin that had once been Sci-Fi's mech. A grim smile tugged at his lips. They had done it. Against all odds, they had brought down the Denobulan Emperor. Earth was safe. But his elation was short-lived. A new alarm blared through the facility, the sound like a dagger of ice in Sullivan's gut. He turned, his eyes widening as he saw the readings on his HUD. A second Denobulan fleet, even larger than the first, had just emerged from hyperspace. Sci-Fi's reinforcements summoned in his final moments. Sullivan felt a wave of despair wash over him. The Warbeasts were gone, his team scattered, his own body broken. How could they possibly stand against this new threat? But even as the thought crossed his mind, a new alert flashed across his HUD. An unknown spacecraft vast beyond imagining had appeared on the edge of the system. Sullivan frowned, bracing himself for yet another enemy. But when the ship hailed him, it wasn't a Denobulan face that appeared on his view screen. It was a human face, weathered and scarred, but unmistakably human. A face Sullivan recognized from the history books, from the tales of the lost expedition that had ventured into the depths of space centuries ago, never to be seen again. Until now. Sullivan's heart raced as the weathered face of Commander Mikhail Koshkin filled the view screen. Koshkin wasted no time with pleasantries. "General Sullivan, I presume. We've been monitoring your situation. Looks like you could use a hand." "Commander Koshkin," Sullivan replied, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and disbelief. Where have you been all this time?" A ghost of a smile crossed Koshkin's face. "It's a long story, General. Suffice it to say, we found something out there, something that could change the course of this war." The view screen flickered, replaced by images of sleek, powerful ships, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly alloy. Weapons bristled from every surface, their design unlike anything Sullivan had ever seen. "Ancient alien technology," Koshkin explained. "We've spent centuries reverse engineering it, building a fleet that could rival any in the galaxy. And now, we've come back to put it to use." Sullivan felt a surge of hope, a feeling he'd thought long extinguished. "Commander, if what you say is true—" "It is," Koshkin assured him, "and we're ready to fight. Just give the word." Sullivan didn't hesitate. "All ships, form up on Commander Koshkin's fleet. We're going in." The counterattack was swift and brutal. Koshkin's ships tore into the Denobulan ranks, their advanced weapons slicing through shields and hull alike. The Denobulan returned fire, but their shots seemed to bend around the human ships, deflected by some unseen force. In the heart of the battle, Sullivan's ship surged forward, its battered hull still a formidable sight. Sullivan gripped the arms of his chair as his crew worked furiously around him, their faces lit by the glow of weapons fire. Suddenly a familiar shape loomed on the viewscreen. Sci-Fi's mech, its armor scorched and dented, but unmistakably operational. Sullivan felt a surge of rage. The bastard had survived. "Bring us about," Sullivan roared. "I want that mech taken down now." His ship veered sharply, breaking formation as it hurtled towards Sci-Fi. The Denobulan Emperor seemed to sense his approach, the mech turning to face him. Energy crackled along its limbs as it raised its weapons. The two ships clashed like ancient titans, their hulls groaning under the strain. Sullivan's crew fought to keep the shields operational as Sci-Fi's mech hammered away at them, its blows shaking the very bones of the ship. Sullivan returned fire, his weapons carving deep gashes into the mech's armor, but Sci-Fi was relentless, driving forward even as his mech began to crumble around him. Across the battlefield, Koshkin's ships pressed their advantage. The Denobulan lines began to buckle, their ships falling one by one before the might of the ancient weapons. Victory was within reach. But then, a new alarm blared across the comms. Koshkin's voice, tight with tension, filled the bridge. "Sullivan, we've got a problem. The Denobulan, they've got some kind of super weapon. Its power readings are off the charts." Sullivan's blood ran cold. On the view screen he could see it, a massive structure, its surface bristling with unfamiliar technology. It was powering up, an ominous glow building at its core. "All ships fall back," Koshkin ordered, his voice urgent. "Get clear now." But Sullivan barely heard him. His focus was entirely on Sci-Fi, on ending this once and for all. He pushed his ship forward, ignoring the warnings blaring from every console. The superweapon's energy readings spiked, the glow at its core becoming blinding. Sci-Fi's mech, seeing Sullivan's approach, raised its arms in a final defiant gesture. Sullivan gritted his teeth, his finger tightening on the trigger. This ends now, he thought, as the world around him exploded into searing, brilliant light. Sci-Fi's mech careened through space, its hull sparking and smoking from the impact of Sullivan's ship. Inside the cockpit, Sci-Fi roared with rage, his hands flying across the controls as he tried to break free of the harpoon that tethered him to his human adversary. "Sullivan!" he bellowed, his voice crackling through the comms. "You'll pay for this." But Sullivan wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the Denobulan superweapon, its surface already beginning to glow with an ominous light as it prepared to fire. He pushed his engines harder, the force pressing him back into his seat as he dragged Sci-Fi's mech behind him. "All ships, pull back," Koshkin's voice echoed across the comms. "Get clear of the blast radius." The human fleet peeled away, their engines flaring as they raced to escape the impending explosion. But Sullivan held his course, his ship shuddering as it strained against the weight of Sci-Fi's mech. The superweapon loomed before him, its surface now pulsing with barely contained energy. Sullivan gritted his teeth, his finger hovering over the eject button. Just a little closer. Sci-Fi's mech suddenly twisted, its arm coming up to aim directly at Sullivan's cockpit. "Die, human scum!" Sci-Fi screamed, his finger tightening on the trigger. But he was too late. Sullivan's ship slammed into the superweapon, the impact sending a shockwave through both vessels. For a moment there was silence. Then the superweapon exploded. The blast was unlike anything Sullivan had ever seen. A wall of pure energy erupted from the superweapon's core, engulfing everything in its path. Sci-Fi's mech vanished instantly, atomized by the sheer force of the explosion. Sullivan's ship fared no better, its hull disintegrating even as he reached for the eject button. The shockwave hit the denobulan fleet like a hammer blow. Ships spun out of control, their hulls buckling under the strain. Some exploded, consumed by the same energy that had destroyed their superweapon. Others simply went dark, their systems fried by the electromagnetic pulse. In the heart of the maelstrom, Sullivan's world went white. Pain seared through every nerve ending as the energy washed over him, cooking him alive in his suit. His last thought before unconsciousness claimed him was of Earth, safe at last from Sci-Fi's tyranny. When the light finally faded, the battlefield was unrecognizable. Where the superweapon had been, there was now only a field of debris, chunks of twisted metal floating in the void. The denobulan fleet was in ruins, those ships still intact, limping away from the carnage. Of Sullivan and Sci-Fi, there was no sign. On the bridge of Koshkin's ship, a stunned silence reigned. They had won, but at what cost? Earth's greatest hero, the man who had brought them back from the brink of annihilation, was gone. "Scan for life signs," Koshkin ordered, his voice hoarse. "If there's even a chance—" But the scans came back negative. Sullivan was gone, his sacrifice the ultimate price for Earth's salvation. As the human fleet regrouped, tending to their wounds and counting their dead, a sense of grim resolve settled over them. They had beaten back the denobulan, but they knew this was only the beginning. Sci-Fi may be gone, but his empire remained, and they would not take this defeat lightly. Earth had to be ready. With Koshkin's advanced technology and the hard lessons learned in this bloody conflict, they would rebuild, stronger than ever. They would create new weapons, new defenses, new strategies, and when the denobulan returned, as they surely would, Earth would be waiting for them. For now, though, there was mourning to be done. Mourning for the fallen, for the brave soldiers who had given their lives in defense of their homeworld, and mourning for Sullivan, the hero who had saved them all, and whose sacrifice would never be forgotten. As Koshkin's ship turned towards home, a glint of metal caught the eye of one of the sensors. A small battered object, tumbling end over end as it drifted away from the battlefield. It was Sullivan's dog tags, blasted clear of his ship in its final moments. A grim smile touched Koshkin's lips as he gave the order to retrieve them. They would be returned to Earth, a final reminder of the man who had given everything for his planet's future. A future that, thanks to him, was still worth fighting for. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.